Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. Today we're going to talk in English, but the presentation will be in German. So this is maybe a bit weird for you, but it is weird for me too, since German is not my language. So I will try to do as good as possible and to navigate as good as possible through this presentation. My name is Mathias Decuypere. I'm affiliated to KU Leuven, and I'm going to do this presentation together with Sigrid Hartong from the Helmut Schmidt University in Hamburg. Together we have a project running. It's called SMASCH. SMASCH doesn't stand, or we talked today and yesterday too about digital media and schools. SMASCH doesn't stand for the fact that schools are smashed when they use digital media. SMASCH doesn't stand for the fact that schools should smash digital media. SMASCH stands for smart schools, which means, or that is our thesis, that schools should deal with digital media in a conscious way, in a deliberate way, in a sustainable way. And today we're going to walk you through what we think thus far the project has shown, the journey we have been on, and what we already have shown in the context of this project. But before I'll do that, I'll just introduce a bit our research, the kind of stuff that we are doing. We think, critical researchers of digital media, but we are not blaming digital media. So our idea is not that digital media are per se good or per se bad. Our idea is that digital media need to be researched and that you need to investigate not on schools, but together with schools, what digital media do when they are introduced or not in educational practices. And here you have a couple of examples of the things that we have written about over the last years. One of the things that we have written about very recently is this one, and this one is about digital platforms and how they change the professionality of educational professionals. So how digital platforms, when they are introduced in educational settings, how they introduce new notions of what it is to be a good teacher, of what it is to be a good parent, of what it is to be a good principal. And if digital platforms do that, then we need to investigate very thoroughly and very closely how this happens exactly. This is a bit our general thesis or a very general idea. We have, over the last year, published on how you can research digital platforms, how you can do that in an empirical manner. So not in a theoretical manner, not in a principled manner, but really trying to look at what happens in concrete educational practices when digital platforms are used or not, and what that then means for education. We do this in a broad way. What I sketch now is the broad lens, but we equally sometimes go a bit deeper. For instance, the one in the middle under is about the effects of nudging and how digital platforms often use nudges in order to steer the behavior of pupils or of principals or of teachers or whoever. This can be done in very detrimental ways, but it can equally be done in good ways. And we see it our task as researchers to look at what happens in practice before we take a stance, before we take a particular judgment. That is a bit our general take on how to research and how to approach digitization in educational contexts today. We have to make a little bit of promotion, but most of you will probably know this one. This is an initiative of Sigrid Unblack the Box, which is a practice-oriented approach, a translation of these research findings into how can we work with educational professionals with this? How can we translate these insights when a medium does what we want or doesn't do what we want? How can we translate that in concrete educational practices? This is one example there. Yes.
This is also available in Simuon and print out, so we can take it with you.
And there's a workshop of that this afternoon. So if you're... So everyone interested over there. But this morning, we're going to talk about SMASCH, about a project. It's an ongoing project. We're more or less in the middle, so we're not going to do the big bling bling here of everything that we have achieved, but we will try to be very honest and show what works, what didn't work, and why we think that is the case. So what will we do today? What will we talk about today? We will take in this presentation 3 parts, or we will do this in 3 parts. First of all, why SMASCH? Why at all did we think this was a good idea? Because we don't do research just for attracting money, but we really believe that what we do needs to serve a good cause. So why exactly did we think SMASCH needed to be there? Secondly, how do we do SMASCH? Like if we do that in practice, if we work together with schools, how does that look like exactly? And then last but not least, and probably very important in the context of this conference, does this then work? if we want to introduce new ways of working with digital media or not, because it's always about the choice. Does making use of a particular digital medium, does it make sense? Does this work or not? And we will give a couple of examples which are a very honest, I think, reflection on where we stand right now. But let's start first with part one, which is something that Sigrid will introduce to you.
And this is why I did not put my phone into the box, because I need it for timekeeping. But I want to talk as briefly as possible a bit where we are coming from. So why this project, why we think that project was important to put in place, or we wanted to put it in place. And we heard a lot about that yesterday, how old these debates actually are about digital education, and that digital education and technology, and even about digital education more specifically, this discourse is pretty old already. And there have been great things in the literature, in the research on this topic, which, like if you look at it, stands in super sharp contrast to what we saw during the pandemic, which you all know. So I will keep that very brief here. This idea that it needs to be quick and dirty, it needs to be fast implemented into schools, into classrooms, and with a very, very heavy emphasis on technology, so the hardware, and equally skills that are mostly using skills. So how do I use it? How do I turn the laptop on? Whatever. So this is, I find very important to see that, of course, then the result was, this is little surprisingly, that media concepts, so which is the heart piece of how a school views its usage of media, that this was in so short time implemented that it was a bit like am Reißbrett, so hardly any opportunity to look at what exactly comes with digital media in a broader kind of notion. So health, data flows, ideas about the actors behind the ad tech industry, the politics, which is something I should know a little bit about if I make a decision on digital education media. So there was hardly any time for that. And at the same time, what we saw very clearly and surprisingly strong in politics was this very simplified linear understanding, right? Like first the Wi-Fi, then the laptops and iPads, and then I can talk about training teachers. And then if I still have time, I can do a bit of critical reflection. So this was really, even in the professional education programs. So this is actually pretty scandalous, but of course also understandable given that pandemic status that we were in. Interestingly, what we saw very strongly in the media, but also in the discourse and research, is that yeah, there has been like a big wave of disappointment, right? We have all seen these studies about, well, the big promises that we heard about what happens when now finally the schools are engaging with digital media. It will become more personalized, individualized. Teachers will decrease their workload, have less administrative burden, and so on and so on and so on. They really didn't happen. So what was the result of that shock or that disappointment? Well, on the one hand, and this is equally not surprising at all, we hear those who say, well, it is not there yet, right? The technology just has to become a little bit better, and then it will be solved. This is something you particularly hear from the big edtech players. Like, for example, we need better training data, and then it will become better personalized. It's called solutionalism, or that is one term to phrase it. And it stands in contrast to something else, which particularly we also observed in the schools, and probably you equally encountered yourself, which is that many said, well, obviously it's not that good. So now that I'm back able to teach people in analog ways, I go back to that. And I store the computer in the closet or put the iPads away. So like in Hamburg, where we are doing SMASCH for a big part, you have, I don't know how many thousand iPads piled up in closets at the moment, which politics really doesn't like. This is stuff we see, but we are more interested in this. This is a third wave of development that we have observed over the past years, and that is actually very, very interesting, because the position here is there is so tremendous societal technological transformations going on very recently, the AI hype, but there are many more, that yes, we need to react to that in our school system, like very, very urgently. It must happen because otherwise people will be in that society and they will be just doomed by the big tech industry, for example, or by being in hyperloops of digital feedback disasters, like say fake news, say cyberbullying, or whatever you want. So we need to deal with that, but that is something completely different than digitization in the sense of bringing iPads to classes, or like setting students in front of these media. I have a quote here, I will just be very brief on that, so that the idea is there's digitization, meaning analog becomes digital, what I did before now becomes digital, but nothing really changes. Or digitality in the sense of I understand society differently in terms of looking at hyperconnectivity, algorithmicity, like all these, like we are deeply entangled with this nowadays. We need to react to that, but that means something different. It means something much broader. This is not like very new, but for us in SMASCH, when we dealt with schools, it was a very big shift of perspective to say, if we talk about digital organization change, we need to talk about parental work. We need to talk about health issues. We need to talk about, this is a big thing. How do you grade? What do you grade? Like, how do you assess performance in this world? About rooms, about times of education. So the view broadens like massively. And for the schools, that was a big, big change of perspectives compared to that very narrow pandemic understanding they were used to. And if you have this very, very broad understanding, you land at very different questions. It is much less about, does my classroom now work better when I use a tablet or not? Towards what are we as an education institution? Where are we already affected by the digital society? Some even say the post-digital society because it's so deeply interwoven. For example, is there already, I brought that example yesterday in my workshop, like is there already this going nuts parent WhatsApp group, even though I don't use tablets in schools? Like then it's heavily affecting what I am as a teacher and how I'm like dealing with that. So there's a lot of effects that we see no matter what, if you have Wi-Fi or not, it doesn't matter. And then I can look at, if that is already happening, how do we want it to happen in better ways or different ways? If we follow the goal of that, it is about Auseinandersetzung and not about alignment. So that it is about dealing like proactively and also very consciously with digitality in society. Gretchenfrage, there is no like reasonable English translation for that. When it comes down to, do I now use digital media or not? This is what we are asked so often, and it's becoming a very, very difficult question because you can at least answer this in 3 different ways, at least. There are many more ways to answer this. But on the left-hand side, you see, yeah, if I look at digital technology that, for example, fosters addiction, like being addicted, not being able to think anymore, not being able to consciously look at this society to make you dumb, probably not use it or don't use it a lot. Particular usage of technology can equally be problematic if other usage of the same technology can be better. So it's even the same technology or the same software, the same apps that you could use in different ways. Let's say I have studied, for example, the Antolin platform, maybe you know that one, that's supposed to improve your reading skills, let's say, in elementary schools. And there's, for example, when you look at that and you leave the small children with that learning software and you don't explain what it does to the child because you maybe as a teacher don't know it yourself, then it might end that the kids just play a quiz. And they don't care about the books they read. They don't care. How should they? They don't know that it's important. Other technology usage. For example, I as a teacher sit with my student in front of that software and say, let's have a look what it does to you. Let's go together and explore. Do you think that's reading? Like, do you think that fosters your critical, like your understanding? For example, like spoiler in Antolin, there's 3 Narrenkappen, so like levels of difficulty. And only if you're the best grader, you get questions on reflection. If you are not good enough, no reflection questions. You can talk about that. And then it's actually a good usage because then it fosters your understanding. this is the bit where we're coming from. So we would like to bring this a bit more into the education field. And this is how we came to found SMASCH. Back to the Belgian side.
Yeah, so we live in a context of digitality. It's everywhere. You cannot not relate to it. Even if you choose not to relate to it, it's a conscious choice. At the same hand, the idea of, for many educational institutions and actors, this is difficult stuff. This is not easy. And if you don't, in a way, try to work with them, what you end up with is towers of laptops. We have pictures from research, which is fantastic. 2 meters high laptops. Tens, hundreds, thousands of euros not used, and that's even only in one school. So imagine if you would calculate the cost of what this is on a European level, that must be insane. So SMASCH, how do you try to do this? SMASCH is a monster. It's super, super big. Like we work across the border of 2 different countries, and we work with 2 universities. We work with 13 schools. We work with the Bildungsbehörden in Hamburg. In Flanders, we don't have that equivalent. So at least there, a little bit less complexity. But you see, this is really, really big. We work with, there's 3 professors involved. So one from educational sciences, one from sociology, and then a third one from organizational sciences. So 3 different interdisciplinary perspectives. There's postdocs, there's doctoral students. There's a lot of other people that you see there in the bottom. But maybe first something about the schools, because I think that's important, that you have a bit of an idea. What we did is we, as they then call this methodologically, but we purposefully sampled. We went for a selection of schools that was deliberately as broad as possible. So we have the very low SES kind of schools included. We have equally schools which are more the gymnasium-oriented type of schools. We have very big ones, very small ones. We have elementary schools, we have secondary schools, and so forth and so on. In total, 13. And what is very interesting to see, to already have something concrete here, is that actually the border, the national border, doesn't matter. What matters is really the context of schools. If school is a German low SES school and you have a Belgian low SES school, even if the language doesn't fit, they find each other somehow, or at least that's what we try to achieve. We equally work, as you can see in the bottom, we work with people who are process coaches. We don't have that knowledge ourselves. Like, how can you guide a team of teachers? How can you guide a school into creating collective vision? Like, that's probably management sciences or something. We don't have that background, so we needed to have those people included as well. IT experts to just try to think about how do you install ICT infrastructure. We don't have that knowledge, so we needed to include them. The Medienbildung and so forth. And if you bring that together, this leads to this kind of picture, which is everyone included in the SMASCH project. It's not important that you read everything, and I think what is important is what you see in the middle. So there's scientists, there's the Medienbildung, there's the Prozessbegleitung, but we equally have, and I think that this is really crucial in each school, we have a SMASCH group. And a SMASCH group is a group of interested people who in the school are interested in forming part of the core team to think together with the other 3 groups about what good digitization in that particular school could be like. So we don't work with one idea of it should be this. It's more the other way around. It's like, what do you think you need given your specific context as a school, given your specific vision? If there is already a vision, and with a lot of schools, there was not really a vision already. So then you need to start with that. Like, what is your vision regarding ICT usage in schools? So what is our approach? Our approach is to go as quickly as possible away from the idea digitization is iPads. Or in Flanders, in Belgium, digitization is Chromebooks. Like, this has been heavily pushed, like every student should have its Chromebook. Yeah, well, then they end up 2 meters high. So we wanted to go away from that idea and really think about digitization in the broadest sense possible. But this immediately leads to think about what this actually is, digitization. Like, how can we think about this? And with and for teachers, I think it's very important to think very basically, like, what is a platform? How is a platform different from an app? How is an app different from a digital infrastructure? If you don't give that knowledge to the teachers, how could they think about how to use this creatively or reflexively? Together with that, equally, the idea of developing a vision. together with schools. And what I already said, like, where do you want to go to? Not from us as the scientists saying like it should be that way, but turning it the other way around. Like, where would you like to arrive yourself? And this leads to a lot of experimentation. This leads to a lot of trying things out, failing, trying again, failing again, trying again, and then something happens. And it's about this something happens that I think we will work on further in the future, but that we would like to introduce now, because this reflexive attitude, this attitude of being a bit of a researcher, this is actually what we try to very actively instill in the schools that we work with. And it doesn't work always, but it sometimes works. And this is what we will talk about now.
Exactly. And we do a bit of action here so that you keep entertained. Yeah, as Matthias already said, this is like very, very, very hard to do. And I will talk a little bit about that. But I firstly want to briefly recommend a bit of promotion here for our midterm report. It is only, I have to say, this is only about the German leg of the project. So about the Hamburg schools, but it was already complex enough to put together all that data and to really like get a good overview. But you can freely access that on our homepage if you're interested. So and advertisement ends. So what did we experience? I mean, this is probably nothing too surprising now. And also after what Matthias has said, for schools, for many of our schools, and that was a very fantastic feedback, actually, they were very relieved that they were finally not forced anymore to have a solution tomorrow. So like, you don't have time, that was what they heard for years. And now we said, take your time. We are there with you for 4 years. That's how long the project lasts. And we said, if you want to make it too quick, it will fail. So let's think about it thoroughly and take the time for that. It is going back and forth, sometimes 2 steps back, 1 forward. But many of the schools responded with a lot of like awareness of Entschleunigung. So we have put it here. At the same time, and I think this is a very important result, and this is also what we're struggling with a lot in the project. You have seen that big circle, right, of all the actors involved. That question of what is digitality, what matters, oh Lord, these are hard questions. And if you have this already with the 2 of us, we are discussing a lot about that, then discuss this with the project coach, like a process coach who is in the consultancy field, then you're somewhere completely else. And with a media pedagogist or a media pedagogist busy with democratic education or one with this more into theater, you get completely different answers. So it's ongoingly negotiating, ringen, about these terms. What do you want? What do you mean? Because it immediately affects the vision development and the goals that you want to aim for. There were tons of aha moments, and I want to say not only with the schools, but mostly with the project team. We learned so much, and there is so much that you like mutually encounter about the logic of looking at digital technology, for example. But of course, and I will have another slide on that a bit later, these blocking parameters of schools and basically school systems. I find that very interesting because many of you are from different backgrounds, like that these sometimes state regulations that cut across what we wanted to achieve here, like heavily, because they, for example, as in Flanders say, every student needs to have a Chromebook. Then what do you do in terms of what is your freedom then still to choose? So that is something we need to negotiate, and this is why we also very intensively work with the state agency in Hamburg so that we negotiate on that level too. And I think in the end, what that midterm report shows and what we see is that it moves, and that gives us hope. So there are great things that happen. We see that it is like it only happens, or that you only see change when teachers understand how that broad theme of digitality relates to what they do in class 1B Monday morning at 8. So that they exactly know, why does it matter for me here in my German class, for example, or because I have 10 language backgrounds of students sitting here in front of me. Why does it matter? Where is that digitality here for me? And the moment they see it and the moment we encounter it together, it's like door opens. At the same time, that technological focus is so hard to break up, not only for us, but like particularly for the schools who have been like trained and socialized so heavily in thinking digitization as technology. And as I said, it's like a lot of encountering of freedom, of creativity. And what I personally just purely enjoy to see is what kind of people are then all of a sudden joining that project. Like the arts teacher who doesn't want to use iPads, but who says like, oh, we're thinking about art. I'm here. I would like to co-think with you. Or like the language teacher or whatever, or people who are the Hausmeister, yeah, because it's all of a sudden about rooms. So that's a lot of interesting people coming together. As Matthias said, we are a lot like dealing with this circle. So thinking, like, what is your vision? Where do you want to go? And you don't need to have a predefined vision. So let's see what you think is the right future to go to or to aim for. And what is your particular all-day contextual environment? And then we have landed at very, very different, and this is just a couple of examples, very different like entry doors to think about this connection, or where the school said this is a theme that we are very, very interested in, or what is very important for us. And you see, for example, on the left bottom that, yes, there's a lot of technology. So there are things that are important in terms of technology usage, but there's equally other things that are very, very broad, and where schools said, yeah, this is actually our theme where we would like to engage with more. I only brought very briefly 3 examples for giving a bit more detailed ideas about what I mean there. For example, regarding technology, I don't know if you have already dealt with LMS systems, so learning management systems. In the public school system in Hamburg, in Belgium, this is like every school has an LMS, a learning management system. This has not necessarily something to do with whether or not you use it in your classroom. Some do, some others don't, but it is about the administration of the school. So like notifying others when you're sick as a teacher, putting in your grades of the students, whatever, digitale Klassenbücher, for example. And many don't associate that with digitality or digitization of schools because it's just there. And we in SMASCH think, well, actually it's heavily influencing your pedagogy. It's heavily influencing how you think your school, how you communicate, how people are giving a place in your school, which is, for example, through roles. Nobody that we have worked with so far has actively thought about which roles are given to which teachers. But all of a sudden, there's, for example, a so-called key user who is putting the courses into place, who is defining which kind of competency frameworks will be filtered into that system and then guide the teachers in grading. That is a heavy influence of what you can do and what you cannot do. So it's very good if we think about critically dealing with digitality, that we critically engage with LMS. That's what we try to do. We try to deal with the schools, like what kind of like visibilities of your school, your students, yourself are created in these systems. What is being able to be done and what not, like where are like also pedagogical bordering practices going on. And then if I know about that, either I follow it, but I'm more aware, or I do it differently and say, well, let's see how we can hack that system, right? And then I can go and experiment. And we have different examples, which might not sound so sexy, like it's an LMS after all. But for example, to just say, well, for us, it is very, very important that like all the teachers do parental work and they're very lost because they feel very insecure with doing that. Let's give it a place on LMS. Let's make it visible. Let's make it a place that we as a school community actively want to deal with that. And then something changes because it becomes something different than you use the default option. It was example 1. Example 2 that I don't need to talk a lot about because you have it all over the place here. We love analog didactic and we very, very much advertise this with particularly our elementary schools because it is very much bringing that positioning of I want to understand digitality, but I don't want to necessarily use iPads in grade 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And the last example I have here, we have many more, but this is the usage of VR or XR, extended reality, where we try to equally experiment with because we think it has promising ideas. It has also a lot of problems. But for example, if I use it for creating my own worlds, I can, for example, think about as a school, let's think about creating a VR environment how our schools should be in 10 years. Let's contrast it with the VR environment we taking the disadvantaged students, and they take a VR of their school experience. And then we see where we are. Then you can, of course, argue, can I only do this with digital media? Probably not. But I can maybe combine, and I can experiment and think about what is different in a VR environment from an environment I draft on big papers, for example. And then I encounter this together with my students. Or I make artificial size manipulation in VR and make somebody very big or very small. And then I'm like, how does it affect you? Because this is how you encounter the internet. Like things are made very big, very small. Or like we have a vocational education context. This is like all this idea of when you have professional development, in how far can these environments really help you to experience? What can't you experience? And how can this be thought of educational? So this is a bit different ideas. There are many more. You see, we have equally the rooms and theater and whatever. But this is something I still wanted to quickly emphasize here. Of course, this is what we want to do. And I talked about what we have seen and that there's so much great stuff going on. But there are so many things that always step in the way, and that makes it also very frustrating. And I would like to emphasize just briefly, like the first one is not only time and resources, but we see, and I would like to learn more about like your school environments or education environments, but people are so fucking tired. Like they don't have energy, and the system has been killed their energy, and they are really like, I would really like to, but, and this is like, I don't know how many motivation workshops we give to make people see that this is supposed to strengthen them and make them, in the end, make it easier for them to be confident in what they do, that it's not yet another thing they need to organize. But at the same time, we see that for many, it is very, very hard to really lose that or give away that linear thinking of first we need to make them understand how the iPad works, and then we can do the other stuff. And of course, all the other things, you know, from the system logics, like, of course, when I have a very strict grading schedule, that kills my energy to experiment, or like to say, well, let's just put it away and do something else. The way how teachers are trained in public education is a disaster if you want to look at digitality. Like it's really not really well working. You need to think of new formats. But everything we do in SMASCH is, or a lot, let's say 90% is not covered in their professional training points that they can use. So it's all extra. Which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that's what it is right now. And of course, social inequality, it's very, very frustrating to see that the low SES schools, those with the biggest problems already, it's so hard for them to get the space, to get the time to experiment with these kind of things, even though for their problems, it would be so, so important. So we have arrived at the end. This is just two things we would like to emphasize in the end. Which is really about positioning. Like this project is about giving people confidence to position themselves and to also claim the time and the resources to engage with something that makes things very slow. We are so slow. But after 2.5 years, we are seeing that there is position changes going on. And for this, what we hear back from the schools, they say, like many of them say, for the first time, since they are engaged with digital education, now it really makes a difference. So now they really see what's different and what it's giving them in terms of perspective. So that gives us hope for the sprint, for the last 1.5 years. And then we hope we have arrived somewhere good. And we leave it here, and we thank you very, very much, and are very much looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.